After a while, Solo began to lose hope that he'd ever see the light of day again, and then he started wondering whether or not the whole adventure was a dream, and that's why it was taking so long. But he didn't really think that, and when his stomach began to rumble so loudly that even Godot could hear it, he decided that he was definitely not dreaming. "Your belly sounds empty," said Godot. "I'm sorry." Godot stopped to stare at Solo. "I only eat once a week," he added, "and I forgot that most humans like to eat a few times a day. Come on, I know just the place." As if by magic, a doorway appeared. It opened onto a platform inside a grand cavern. The roof was sparkling with the most spectacular display of glowworms. They made the roof appear to blaze like the night sky. Next to the platform was a shimmering lake of emerald green water. It seemed to be lit from underneath. On the platform, a table was set for two. The tablecloth was purple velvet with tiny golden stars sewn all over it. Each star had a life of its own and would alternately shine and dim, sometimes in a long stream of light and at other times in short bursts. At the centre of the table was a jug of milk and two silver tumblers, a plate of steaming hot bread, several different sorts of jam, plenty of cheeses, and a huge platter of fruit. Solo's tummy grumbled loudly when he saw watermelon and strawberries, his favourites. "I apologise for being such a poor host," said Godot, drawing a chair back so that Solo could be seated. "There are plenty of rest stops along the way. I simply forgot." Solo nodded. "Now," said Godot, "someone like Molly would never forget to offer you a pit stop to replenish your energy. Her kindness is of the highest order." Solo nodded, wishing he could meet Molly. Godot sat next to Solo, and even though he'd said how infrequently he eats, Solo, even though he'd said how infrequently he eats, Godot started piling his plate. Godot still piled his plate with a sample of everything. He then proceeded to eat as if he might never see food again. Solo also helped himself and felt happy that such an amazing rest stop existed. The more they ate, the more food there seemed to be. "I love this," said Solo, beaming at Godot. "Do we have much further to go?" "Much further?" asked Godot. "How do you mean?" The food had made Solo forget how difficult it was to have a straightforward conversation with Godot. Will it take me hours or days to get back up to the surface of the earth?" "I'm not sure," said Godot. "That depends on how many of these stops we make and whether or not Mrs. Platypus comes back, and if we decide to have a sleep or two or not." "Just say we don't stop for any more food and we don't have a sleep and Mrs. Platypus doesn't come back. Then how long might it take?" asked Solo. "Still hard to say," said Godot, his tongue hanging out. "It also depends on how deep underground we are. I'm really not sure." Solo's heart began to sink as he considered the prospect of never seeing his family again and being trapped underground forever. Tears began to prickle at the corner of his eyes. "It would have to happen when I'm caught up trying to help the tunnel kids," he thought. "Now my family will think I've been stolen too." Godot seemed to sense the horror his words had struck into Solo, and he added quickly, "Don't worry. Once we get to the dark zone, we'll know the surface is near." Solo wondered what the dark zone was, but he was glad to hear that it was a sign of near success. His heart felt a lot lighter as he drank a large mug of the most delicious milk he'd ever tasted. After they'd finished their feast, Solo and Godot continued their journey through the maze of tunnels. The walls became like marble in some sections, and after a while Solo noticed that there was less and less emash, even though the walls were still luminous. He asked how the walls could glow without emash. "Behind the marble are large deposits of solid emash," said Godot. "It's so bright that it shines out through the rock." "But I thought you said that emash but I thought you said the emash is a living liquid, not a solid." "It is a living liquid, but remember I said that it puts itself inside a skin when it can't find its way to the Earth's surface. Well, the marble deposits here are so solid that they've caused the normally wet e-mash to harden altogether. It doesn't matter. The e-mash just lies there dormant until something happens to take the marble out of the way. The e-mash will outlast everything else on the Earth, so if there was ever an explosion here, the only thing that'd be left would be e-mash. Listening to Godot's long explanation made Solo feel quite dizzy. But how can it shine through solid rock? He asked, wondering if it was wise to ask such a question. Did I forget to tell you? Asked Godot. If e-mash can't get to the surface, it not only forms a skin, it also becomes brighter and brighter, so that its energy is felt through its light, if not through its actual presence. I think you did forget to tell me that, said Solo. I suppose that one day, if the e-mash doesn't get to escape to the surface, the whole Earth will shine so brightly that people will go down under the ground and try to release the stuff, laughed Godot, becoming quite excited. But what about the kindness wizards and the special animals? Won't they come and take the stuff up? That's what I've been told, but who they are and when they'll come, I don't know. Solo decided to stop asking questions. His brain was starting to feel scrambled. After trekking silently for a while, Solo noticed that it seemed to be getting less and less bright in the tunnels. What's happening? He asked. It's not very bright anymore. We're nearly to the dark zone, said Godot quietly. I'll leave you once we get there. While I'm working down deep, it's best if I stay away from the allure of the surface. Why? Asked Solo. The surface reminds me of all the fun I usually have, the beach, running up mountains, careering over fields, all of that, said Godot. But I want to finish my apprenticeship with Mrs. Platypus. That way I can help more creatures find their true path. Their true path to what? Asked Solo. The Labradoodle looked at Solo with the Labradoodle gave Solo a funny look. To what they want, of course. Solo nodded, but he felt a little sad. Even though Godot was strange, he was wonderful, and Solo didn't exactly know where he was, so it would be useful to have a guide. All of a sudden they reached a pitch-black area in the tunnel. Then a dim light returned, but after a few more footsteps there was no light at all. I won't be going any further at the moment, said Godot, but don't worry, we're quite near the surface now. How will I know where to go? Asked Solo, feeling oddly anxious. He felt a bit embarrassed, too, because he was normally so confident in the tunnels. You should take this, said Godot, handing Solo a candle. Don't light it yet, and when you do, move slowly because I only have one match to give you. If it goes out, that's it, I'm afraid. Solo was about to say that he had his magic jacket with him and his headlight, but then he remembered that he'd been drawn under the ground by magic. He didn't have any of his tunnelling gear with him. His heart sank. Godot brushed his body up against Solo in the darkness and wagged his tail. Just keep going up. Don't take any downward turns and you'll be fine, okay? Okay, said Solo doubtfully. Thanks, Godot, and please thank Mrs. Platypus for me. I hope we'll meet again soon. Oh, we'll meet again, said Godot, when it's time. All right, said Solo. I'll be careful with the candle and the match. Goodbye, said Godot, nuzzling his head against Solo's body. I'll look forward to our next adventure.